Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Justice League 2017, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. The world is mourning. The skies are grayer, the streets quieter, the symbols of hope crumbling beneath the weight of absence. With the death of Superman, Earth has been left exposed, not just emotionally, but physically. The one being who could inspire peace with presence alone is gone, and in his absence, something ancient begins to stir. Something malevolent. This isn't just a new chapter in a superhero saga. It's a collision of myths, gods, and mankind. It's the assembling of reluctant legends in the face of a coming storm. This is Justice League, a film that hurtles across dimensions, unites strangers with scars, and gives us a glimpse of what it means to fight when hope feels completely out of reach. From the first scene, the film carries a strange energy, a sense of being caught between mourning and movement. Bruce Wayne, still haunted by the sacrifice of Clark Kent, feels the cold weight of responsibility heavier than ever. He knows something's coming, something dark, and he can feel the tremors in the very air. Aliens called parademons have begun to appear in scattered attacks, whispering of a threat far greater than any Gotham criminal or Metropolis menace. It's a feeling that lingers in the shadows of every scene. War is coming, and Earth is unprepared. To stand a chance, Bruce sets out to build something more than himself. Not a team. A league. He turns first to Diana Prince, Wonder Woman, whose grace masks wounds as ancient as the world itself. She, too, has felt the shift in the cosmic balance, and though she hesitates at first, the echoes of Superman's death and the memories of long-forgotten battles draw her back into the fight. Their alliance is fragile, not because of mistrust, but because of pain. Diana has seen too many fall. Bruce has watched too many rise and fall alone. Yet they move forward together, like two halves of a broken compass still trying to find true north. Their search leads them to a series of scattered individuals, outliers, outcasts, warriors who don't yet realize the weight they carry. In the frozen, storm-lashed wilds of Iceland, they seek Arthur Curry, the Aquaman. He's a man of two worlds, surface and sea, belonging fully to neither. Dripping with reluctant power, Arthur resists the call, scoffing at Bruce's proposal with a kind of smirk that hides a deeper storm. He's not ready to join anything, much less a team. But something in him stirs at the mention of unity, of war. And the threat to his underwater homeland eventually leaves him no choice. Meanwhile, Diana seeks out Victor Stone, Cyborg, once a promising athlete, now a fractured man made from alien technology and human tragedy. Victor doesn't trust himself, let alone others. His transformation, triggered by a mysterious device called a mother box, has left him struggling with questions of identity, agency, and purpose. But Diana, patient and calm, sees something more in him, a spark still flickering beneath the circuitry. He joins, not out of hope, but out of necessity. The fight is coming to him whether he answers or not. The final piece is Barry Allen, the Flash, a socially awkward, brilliant young man with a heart as fast as his feet. When Bruce finds him, Barry barely hesitates. "I need friends," he says with a breathless honesty. He's the lightest of them all, the spark that dances between the film's heavier moments, yet even he carries loss in his pockets. A father imprisoned, a life half-built, a world that moves too slowly for someone always running. And so, the League begins to form. Not smoothly, not triumphantly, but like a jagged melody starting to find its rhythm. But their gathering is not without pressure. Because the true threat, the heart of the coming darkness, is Steppenwolf, a warlord from beyond the stars, whose voice rumbles with the hunger of ancient conquest. He seeks the three mother boxes, devices of immense cosmic power, which, when united, will terraform Earth into something unrecognizable. The boxes are hidden, barely, across Amazonian strongholds, Atlantean temples, and human soil. Their guardians fail. Steppenwolf is relentless. The battle for the boxes becomes a race. Who can unite faster? The League or the enemy? As the League faces Steppenwolf's onslaught, it becomes brutally clear, they're not enough. Not yet. They're individuals with power, yes, but without cohesion. They falter, fall, fight among themselves. And the solution, unspoken and terrifying, creeps to the surface. They need Superman. But he's gone. Or is he? Here, the film turns its face toward resurrection. The team decides to use one of the mother boxes, the same alien tech that gave life to Victor Stone, to bring Superman back. It's not a unanimous choice. It's messy, morally complex, and desperate. But desperation is where this League lives now. They steal Clark Kent's body. They place it in the Kryptonian Genesis chamber. And with a surge of lightning and Barry's speed, they spark the unthinkable. Superman returns. But not as they remembered him. He's disoriented. Broken. And when he rises, he does not smile. He sees threats in familiar faces, friends as enemies. What follows is a haunting showdown. Superman, eyes burning red, trading blows with the very people trying to save the world. The moment freezes with a single look. Superman tracking Flash, moving as fast as him, eyes locked, unblinking. The power imbalance is undeniable. Only Lois Lane, his tether to humanity, can pull him back. With her voice, her presence, she draws him away. The Man of Steel, once dead, now lives. But he doesn't rejoin the fight. Not immediately. He goes home. To remember who he was. To find the part of himself that wore the symbol not just as armor, but as hope. As the League regroups, Steppenwolf nears victory. The final box is within his grasp. He retreats to a remote part of Russia, where the convergence of the three boxes has begun. Reality itself begins to warp. Plants twist unnaturally. The sky bleeds red. The final act descends into chaos. The League, still raw and forming, heads into battle without guarantees. Arthur rides the tide of his own power, commanding waves and wielding a trident with newfound purpose. Victor taps into the deepest parts of his transformation, discovering not just what he can do, but why he must do it. Barry, trembling, musters the courage to tap into the speed force at full throttle, using time as a tool, not a trap. Bruce charges forward, not because he's the strongest, but because someone has to start the fight. And Diana? She leads them with steel in her eyes and ancient fury in her veins. They battle Steppenwolf with everything they have. But still, he's winning. Until the air shifts. The clouds part. And Superman arrives. Not with thunder. With clarity. His return is not a deus ex machina. It's the final piece of a puzzle the League was never meant to solve alone. His presence doesn't overshadow, it unifies. He doesn't fight for them. He fights with them. And together, they break Steppenwolf. Not with rage, but with balance. The boxes are separated. The world, for now, is safe. But the Justice League is only beginning. As the dust settles, the film teases the fractures still ahead. Glimpses of larger wars, deeper evils, shadows moving behind the scenes. A villain whispers of a multiverse. A prison cell sits empty. A masked man warns of a future not yet written. It's not closure. It's ignition. Because Justice League isn't about perfection. It's about possibility. About broken people choosing to fight. About legends who didn't want to be heroes finding themselves at the edge of everything, and leaping anyway. It's messy. It's flawed. It's a chorus sung in different keys. But in the end, they find harmony. And Earth, once quiet in mourning, hears the rumble of hope again. The world was quieter now, not by choice, but by the slow, suffocating stillness of grief. Superman was gone, and in his absence, the planet didn't just mourn, it unraveled. His death left behind a silence too vast to fill, A symbol fallen that had once stitched nations together, calmed chaos, inspired courage. Now, without that beacon in the sky, fear crept in, softly at first, then with teeth. The streets whispered unrest. Shadows seemed longer. Something ancient had heard the cry of a world suddenly vulnerable, and it was coming. In Gotham, Bruce Wayne didn't sleep much anymore. The guilt clung to him like a second skin. He remembered the final battle, the moment Superman died not as a god, but as a man, saving a world that had never quite deserved him. Bruce, ever the pragmatist, knew better than most that nature abhors a vacuum. Something would rise to fill the gap left by Kal-El. Something dark. And so he began to prepare, not with gadgets or walls or contingency plans, but with an idea, a gathering of protectors, not soldiers. His first clue came from a winged creature, grotesque and fast, that he caught mid-theft in the city. A parade mon. Alien, shrieking, wild. And when it died, it left behind a faint marking burned into the walls, 3 intersecting boxes. A symbol he didn't understand, but one he couldn't ignore. He knew what it meant, even if he couldn't explain it. War was coming. And he'd need help. So Bruce did what he always did. He started hunting. Not for enemies. For allies. Across the sea, in a frostbitten corner of Iceland, he traveled to find a man spoken of in rumors, a man who saved sailors in storms, who moved through waves like a god, who surfaced only when the ocean was angry. Arthur Curry. The locals called him the Aquaman. The tavern he entered reeked of sweat and salt, and Bruce wasted no time. He spoke in plain terms. The world is dying. We need warriors. Join us. But Arthur wasn't a man to be persuaded easily. Torn between the surface world and the ocean's kingdom, he belonged to neither. He drank heavily, laughed harder, and made it clear he didn't take orders from rich men in capes. As Bruce watched him dive back into the roaring sea, disappearing beneath the waves with the fury of a tide, he understood. Arthur would come, when the water called him home. Back in Themyscira, a different storm was brewing. An ancient vault had begun to tremble. Beneath it, buried deep in the earth, lay one of the mother boxes, artifacts older than history, humming with alien power. The Amazons, eternal protectors of this box, had felt its stirrings for days. But nothing prepared them for what came. The sky split open, and from the heavens descended Steppenwolf, a monstrous warrior clad in spiked armor, carrying an axe soaked in destruction. He moved with purpose, not rage. This was not an attack, it was a harvest. He slaughtered without pause. The Amazons fought bravely, fiercely, but the box responded to him. It wanted to be taken. As Steppenwolf escaped through a boom tube, the box in his grasp, Queen Hippolyta knew what it meant. The great darkness had returned. The old prophecy had begun. And so she lit the ancient warning fire, an act not seen in thousands of years. Across the ocean, in Paris, Diana Prince saw the flame from atop the Louvre. Her heart dropped. The world had changed again. Meanwhile, back in Gotham, Bruce returned to Alfred, heavy with the weight of half-built plans. "We have to find the others," he said. Alfred, ever the skeptic, pressed for clarity. What if they say no? Bruce had no answer. He simply knew that if they didn't gather soon, they wouldn't have a world left to defend. Diana's search led her to Victor Stone, a young man hidden from the world, watching it through digital eyes. Once a promising football star, Victor had been caught in an explosion that should have taken his life. His father, Silas Stone, a scientist at CR Labs, refused to let him die. Using the energy of a mother box, the very same kind Steppenwolf now hunted, Silas rebuilt Victor from scraps of man and alien metal. The result was Cyborg, a hybrid of grief, power, and resentment. Victor didn't want to be found. He felt cursed. Watched. Inhuman. But Diana approached him not as a recruiter, but as someone who understood the weight of silence. She didn't demand. She simply said, "You're not alone." And for the first time in a long while, Victor hesitated. In Central City, another spark waited to be lit. Barry Allen lived fast, thought faster, and lived in the shadows of both brilliance and tragedy. His father, wrongly imprisoned for the murder of his mother, had left Barry drifting. But his speed, granted by a freak accident, became both his escape and his burden. When Bruce found him, the encounter was awkward, endearing. Barry tried to mask his loneliness with jokes. But when Bruce tossed a batarang, and Barry caught it mid-air, time slowing around him, his eyes widened with realization. "You're the Batman," he whispered. Bruce smiled. Barry didn't hesitate. "I need friends." And just like that, the team began to form. But Steppenwolf was already moving faster. His next target, Atlantis. Beneath the sea, the second mother box pulsed with ancient power. It was guarded by Mera and the elite Atlantean warriors, but Steppenwolf struck like a phantom, tearing through defenses with brutal speed. Arthur, sensing the tremor in the water, arrived too late. The box was gone. The enemy was growing stronger. And the war had officially breached the sea. Reluctantly, Arthur joined the fight. The League, still incomplete, now had fragments of strength. But no unity. No leader. And as Victor began to trust his powers, deciphering messages hidden within the alien tech that now flowed through him, he revealed the truth. The last mother box had been found. It was with him all along. Hidden. Protected. The final box. The final key. Steppenwolf was coming for it. As Bruce, Diana, Barry, Arthur, and Victor stood together in a darkened warehouse, their faces half-lit by flickering light, they were not yet a team. They were ghosts of something forming. They disagreed, argued, but they stood in the same room. And that was a start. They needed more. They needed him. And as the camera lingered on a figure shrouded in silence, buried in memory, the question rose like thunder in their eyes. Could they bring Superman back? And if they could, should they? The world was waiting. So was the answer. The warehouse felt colder now. Not because of the concrete walls or the flickering lights, but because of the weight of the decision that hung between them. The five stood in uneasy silence. Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg. All warriors in their own right, all staring down a question that none of them truly wanted to ask aloud. Should they resurrect a god? Victor had revealed the truth. The final mother box was in his possession, the alien artifact that had rebuilt him from the brink of death. That same power could potentially bring Superman back. It wasn't a theory born from hope, but from data, from what Victor could now see within the code of the universe. The box could create life. But life changed. Victor knew that better than anyone. Still, the logic was unavoidable. Steppenwolf was getting stronger. With two mother boxes already in his grasp, the third would tip the scales. The unity, the fusing of all three boxes, would reshape the planet into something else, something born of conquest and decay. Without Superman, they couldn't win. Even united, they barely understood what they were fighting. The team could feel it in their bones. They weren't enough. Not yet. And so the plan was made. They returned to the Kryptonian ship, hidden deep in Metropolis, where Superman's body had been preserved. Bruce arranged for security clearances, and Barry offered his speed to generate the necessary energy. They would place Clark in the Genesis chamber, the cradle that had once healed his injuries, and then charge the box at the exact moment it touched the amniotic fluid. It had to be precise. A mistimed surge could destroy the chamber, or worse. As they lowered Superman's body into the liquid, time seemed to still. His face remained peaceful, untouched by the violence that had once ended him. Diana looked away, her jaw tense with unspoken pain. Arthur shifted uncomfortably, still unsure if they were playing with forces too great to control. Victor readied the box. Barry took his position. Then came the spark. Barry ran. the world blurring into lightning and wind, and just as he reached the chamber, he touched the box with a crackling finger. Everything stopped, and then exploded. The box sank. The chamber lit, and Clark's body convulsed. He was alive, but not there. When he rose, dripping and disoriented, the League approached slowly. They called out to him, each voice careful, like walking barefoot on glass. But Clark didn't recognize them. Not as allies. Not as anything. His vision darted. His muscles tightened. And when Victor's internal systems involuntarily triggered a defense protocol, reading Superman as a threat, it became war. The battle was short, violent, and terrifying. The League was no match. He lifted Bruce like a rag doll. He matched Barry's speed, catching him in a frozen moment of pure horror. His heat vision flared. Diana held him back with all her might, her bracelets clashing against his strength, but it was futile. Only one voice stopped him. Lois. She appeared like a breath of memory, her voice cracking through the madness. Clark turned. He saw her, and something in him broke free from whatever pull the resurrection had taken. His fists loosened. His breath slowed. Without a word, he took her in his arms and vanished into the sky. The League, battered and bruised, had what they needed, but not yet what they hoped for. Superman was back. But he wasn't ready to join the fight. Steppenwolf, meanwhile, wasted no time. With the final mother box now unguarded, he descended into their labs, tearing through resistance with effortless brutality. Silas Stone, Victor's father, tried to prevent the theft. In a desperate act of courage, he locked himself inside a chamber with the box and superheated it, marking it so Victor could track its energy signature later. But it cost him everything. Silas died in front of his son. Another sacrifice made in shadows. Another wound opened in the war. Grief-stricken but determined, Victor decoded the signature. The final battle's location was revealed, an abandoned nuclear facility in Russia, remote and desolate, now transformed into the stage for planetary extinction. There, Steppenwolf had begun the unification of the boxes. His army of parademons swarmed the area, feeding on fear, preparing for conquest. The League moved. They arrived in silence, each warrior clad in scars and questions, but ready. Batman led the charge, piloting his Nightcrawler through enemy fire, drawing attention away from the others. Barry circled the perimeter, ready to break the speed barrier when the time came. Arthur and Diana fought like storm and steel, blades flashing in unison. Victor, guided by his father's final act, reached the boxes. But the unity had already begun. Victor needed time. Barry needed space. And Bruce needed hope. And hope came. In a sonic boom, the sky split. The air shimmered. Superman returned. Clad in black, face calm, eyes clearer than before, he landed with a quiet finality. The fight changed instantly. Steppenwolf, once untouchable, now staggered. Every punch from Clark drove deeper. Every blow reminded the villain that this world had a protector again. While the others held the line, Barry began to run. He moved faster than he ever had, time-bending, slowing. The moment to charge Victor had come, but then he was struck. A parademon clipped him, sending him tumbling, wounded, bloodied, time slipping away. Victor cried out. It was too late. But Barry, shaking, rose. He whispered to himself, "You gotta break your one rule." And then he ran faster than light. He reversed time. The world stitched itself backward, explosions reversed, particles reassembled, the boxes ununified. And Victor connected. Inside the mother boxes, Victor saw visions, his parents, his past, a tempting illusion of peace. But he resisted. He chose who he was. And he tore them apart. The unity failed. Steppenwolf screamed. In one final moment of unity, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman struck him together. His axe shattered. His fear was revealed. And the parademons turned on him. He was dragged back through the boom tube, a failure. The world had been saved. The League stood victorious, not as survivors, but as something more. Something unified. In the days that followed, Bruce purchased the old Wayne Manor, converting it into a hall for heroes. Diana stepped further into the public eye. Arthur returned to the seas, no longer running from destiny. Barry visited his father with news. He'd earned a job at the crime lab. Victor, alone beneath the stars, whispered a quiet thanks to the man who made him whole. And Clark? He walked the streets again. Smile returned. Chest open. Hope reborn. The Justice League had come together not in triumph, but in necessity. And what they built was only the beginning. In the wake of a fallen god, the people who rose to take his place weren't statues or saints. They were fractured, flawed, full of questions they hadn't dared to ask themselves in years. And maybe that's why the world needed them, not as replacements for Superman, but as reminders that heroism isn't carved from perfection. It's born from pain, from the choices we make in the face of fear, from the moment we stop running and decide to stand together. The characters of Justice League are each a study in contrast, caught between legend and humanity, myth and vulnerability. And when their arcs converge, it's not with thunderous certainty, but with the quiet throb of purpose. At the center of this convergence is Bruce Wayne, the Batman, the brooding tactician wrapped in armor and guilt. In many ways, Bruce begins the film not as a man driven by vengeance, but by regret. The shadow of Superman's death hangs heavily over him, not only because he couldn't stop it, but because he caused it. That admission isn't made with words, but with actions. You see it in his eyes when he stares at the empty sky, in the way he speaks of Clark not just with admiration, but reverence. He believes in Superman now, more than he ever did while the man was alive. Bruce's arc isn't about redemption in the traditional sense. It's about rebuilding faith. Faith in others. In unity. He isn't trying to lead the League because he wants power. He's doing it because he doesn't trust himself to win alone. There's a rawness to Bruce we haven't seen before. He opens himself to failure, to criticism, to needing help. And that shift, from lone wolf to unifier, is what elevates his character from a grizzled guardian to a true cornerstone of the team. Standing beside him, unshakable and radiant, is Diana Prince, Wonder Woman. Diana is no stranger to loss. She's worn it like armor for centuries. But what's striking about her presence here isn't her strength. It's her compassion. She doesn't rush to lead. She listens, watches, steps in when it matters. She's the quiet balance to Bruce's intensity, the soul of the team. Yet even she carries ghosts. The memory of Steve Trevor lingers, and it's clear she's still haunted by her choice to disappear from the world after his death. But through the League, she finds a reason to return, not just to battle, but to connection. Her scenes with Victor are especially telling. She sees in him a young man drowning in the same kind of isolation she once chose. And rather than push, she invites. Diana's superpower isn't just her strength or skill, it's her empathy. It's why the team doesn't just follow her, they believe in her. And then there's Arthur Curry, the Aquaman. Half Atlantean, half human, and fully uncommitted to either world. At first glance, Arthur is the outsider. The muscle. The reluctant warrior who drinks alone and scoffs at the idea of allegiance. But that mask cracks slowly. His swagger isn't indifference, it's defense. His reluctance to join the League isn't about doubt in them, it's about doubt in himself. Atlantis never embraced him. The surface world confuses him. He exists in the in-between. And in the League, he finds the one thing he never had, a space where he's not either. He's both. His arc is subtle but powerful. He goes from reluctant participant to protective brother. The moment he lets Barry see his fear before battle, "We might not all make it," isn't weakness. It's leadership. Real, honest Barry Allen is the heartbeat of the League. The youngest. The fastest. The most human. While others carry centuries of pain or decades of trauma, Barry's wounds are fresh. His mother is dead. His father, wrongly imprisoned. His life is a blur, literally and emotionally. He runs not just with speed, but with escape. But in Bruce, he finds something he didn't expect, a chance. A purpose. And it changes him. Barry isn't a fighter. Not yet. He admits it openly. "I just push people and run away." But his courage isn't in his fists. It's in his willingness to stay when things get hard. To face death with a joke, to make others laugh when hope feels thin. And when the moment comes, when the world begins to collapse and time itself starts to unravel, Barry doesn't run from it. He runs into it, breaks his one rule, and rewrites reality. His arc is that of the everyman who becomes essential. Not because he was born to be a hero, but because he chose to be one. Victor Stone, Cyborg, is perhaps the most emotionally layered of them all. His transformation isn't symbolic. It's literal. He died in the eyes of the world, and was reborn as something he didn't ask to be. Part machine. Part man. All pain. Victor doesn't speak much early on. He doesn't need to. His silences are loud. His movements are restrained. He's not hiding from the world. He's protecting it from himself. The brilliance of Victor's arc is in how he reclaims his identity. His powers, drawn from the same alien tech that threatens the planet, are overwhelming. He can access any system, control any network. But the greatest power he gains is understanding. He begins to see that he's not a victim of his circumstance. He's the key to its salvation. His bond with his father, Silas, is strained, even broken. But Silas's sacrifice reawakens something in him. Not forgiveness, but focus. And when Victor enters the Unity, facing his deepest fears, his family, his past, the temptation to give in, he doesn't just reject the vision. He shatters it. He becomes whole not by denying who he is, but by embracing all of it. And finally, there's Clark Kent. Superman. His arc, though brief in screen time, is seismic in impact. His resurrection isn't triumphant. It's painful. Confusing. He returns not as a savior, but as a question. Who am I now? He's stronger, yes. But colder at first. Detached. The world he died to save doesn't feel the same. And neither does he. It's Lois who grounds him. Brings him back to the man beneath the cape. Clark's real power has never been his strength. It's his hope. His belief in people. And when that returns, when he remembers the sound of his mother's voice, the warmth of the farm, the joy of flight, he doesn't just rejoin the team. He completes it. His arrival in the final battle isn't just a turning point in power. It's a moral recalibration. The League fights harder when he stands beside them. Not because he leads, but because he believes in them. He becomes not the centerpiece, but the catalyst. The reminder that they can win. Together. What's beautiful about these characters is that none of them are finished. None of their arcs resolve in neat bows. But the foundation is laid. Bruce begins to believe. Diana begins to lead. Arthur begins to belong. Barry begins to grow. Victor begins to heal. And Clark begins anew. The Justice League is born not from triumph, but from necessity. From individuals carrying their own weight, deciding, even reluctantly, to carry each other's. And that decision, quiet, flawed, human, is what makes them legendary. They are not the gods we expected. They are something better. They are us if we dared. The making of Justice League, 2017, wasn't just the story of a superhero team fighting to save the world. It became one of the strangest, most turbulent journeys in modern film history. And not because of what happened on screen, but because of what happened behind it. The film that eventually arrived in theaters was like a ghost of the story that had once been promised. An echo of something larger, stranger, and more conflicted. Its production was a puzzle with missing pieces, rewrites, reshoots, secret mustaches, and two directors with wildly different visions stitched into one cinematic Frankenstein. And the result? A blockbuster surrounded by a fog of rumors, revelations, and the kind of trivia that feels too bizarre to be true, but is. Let's start with something no one could ignore: the mustache. When Henry Cavill returned to reshoot scenes as Superman, he was already deep into filming another film, Mission: Impossible – Fallout, where he played the rugged, sharply dressed CIA operative August Walker. That character had a very specific look, which included a thick, bristling mustache. Paramount Pictures, the studio behind Fallout, had a strict policy: Cavill could not shave. Warner Brothers pleaded. They offered to pay for digital restoration of the mustache in Fallout. Paramount said no. So, Justice League's post-production team made a bold decision. They digitally erased Superman's mustache in every red-hot scene. The result? Some of the most uncanny facial effects ever seen in a major motion picture. Cavill's upper lip became a legend unto itself. Audiences noticed it immediately. His expressions looked off, like he was caught between a smile and a grimace. The uncanny valley had never looked so expensive. And yet, behind that awkward lip was a much deeper story of a film caught between two worlds. Originally, Justice League was helmed by Zack Snyder, who had crafted the dark, mythic tone of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Snyder had ambitious plans for the DC universe: long-form arcs, interconnected worlds, a slow-burn rise of gods and monsters. But midway through Justice League's post-production, tragedy struck. Following the death of his daughter, Snyder stepped away from the project. Enter Joss Whedon, known for his work on Marvel's The Avengers. Warner Brothers brought him in not just to finish the film, but to change it, lighten the tone, restructure the story, add more humor, trim the runtime. And so, Justice League became a hybrid, a collision between Snyder's operatic gravitas and Whedon's quippy momentum. Entire sequences were rewritten. Dozens of scenes were refilmed. Characters were reshaped. The final cut bore only fragments of Snyder's original vision, with Whedon contributing an estimated 80 new pages of script. But the transition wasn't smooth. According to cast interviews and whispers from the set, the atmosphere changed. Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg, later spoke out publicly about the experience, alleging unprofessional behavior during reshoots. His performance, which Snyder had envisioned as the emotional core of the film, was dramatically cut down. Entire backstories vanished. Scenes that had once held weight now felt like fragments. And then there was the matter of runtime. Warner Brothers executives were determined that the final film not exceed 2 hours. Not 2 hours and 1 minute, 2 hours flat. This meant drastic edits. Subplots were slashed. Character arcs were truncated. Epic battles were trimmed to the bone. The pacing, once designed to build over multiple acts, became uneven, rushing where it should have paused, cutting away just as moments began to breathe. Yet, amidst the chaos, strange moments of brilliance still peeked through. Like the infamous scene where Barry Allen draws on a suspect's face in super speed, or the slow-motion shots of Aquaman walking into crashing waves like a rock star about to drop a mic. These moments, some Snyder, some Whedon, clashed tonally, but stayed burned in memory. You could feel two movies wrestling for dominance inside every frame. One of the weirdest bits of trivia? The Green Lantern. During early drafts and storyboards, a member of the Green Lantern Corps was set to appear in the final battle. The concept art showed a warrior descending from the sky during Steppenwolf's defeat, signaling that the universe was beginning to take notice of Earth's struggles. That scene was cut, but if you look closely during the flashback battle against Darkseid's armies, you'll catch a Green Lantern-like figure fighting alongside the ancient armies of men, Amazons, and Atlanteans. He dies quickly. His ring flies off. A whisper of what could have been. And speaking of Darkseid, he wasn't even in the theatrical release. Originally, Snyder's story placed Darkseid, DC's ultimate cosmic villain, as the puppet master behind Steppenwolf. The boom tubes, the invasion, the boxes, it all led to Darkseid. He was meant to appear fully by the end, looming as the next great threat. But in the theatrical cut, he vanished entirely. Even the name Darkseid is barely uttered, like a god redacted from his own mythology. Another oddity, the musical score. Danny Elfman, composer of Tim Burton's Batman and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, was brought in by Whedon to create a new score, replacing Junkie XL, Tom Hokenborg, who had originally scored the film with Snyder. Elfman inserted familiar themes, like his own 1989 Batman theme and even John Williams' classic Superman theme. But these nostalgic callbacks, while fun for longtime fans, felt dissonant to many. The musical tone veered from operatic doom to playful orchestration within a single scene. It was like listening to two bands play on the same stage, a beat apart. Critically, this act splits viewers. Some interpret it as narrative laziness, a convenient way to restore balance. Others see it as the most honest moment in the film, the acknowledgement that sometimes we don't move forward by inventing new icons, but by learning to appreciate what we had all along. The resurrection doesn't go smoothly. It shouldn't. Superman's confusion, his aggression, his battle with the League, it all underscores the cost of trying to control destiny. The film suggests that even the right decision, made in desperation, can come at a price. And yet, this is where the League earns its name. Not in the battle with Steppenwolf. Not in the final charge. But in the moment they choose to bring Superman back, and then step aside to let him find himself again. They don't control him. They don't lecture him. They trust him. And in that, we see the film's deepest emotional thread, belief. Belief that the world, fractured and weary, is still worth fighting for. Belief that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. Belief that unity is not born from agreement, but from choice. Steppenwolf, as a villain, received mixed reactions. Some critics saw him as too one-dimensional, a CGI brute lacking nuance. Others argued that his simplicity served a narrative purpose. He's not meant to be the focus. He's a catalyst, a metaphor for the kind of absolute fear that creeps in when leadership fails. His goal is not domination for pleasure, it's to prove loyalty to a greater power. He's a servant trying to reclaim favor from Darkseid. In that way, he becomes a reflection of Bruce, a man seeking redemption, only through destruction instead of healing. When Superman finally returns to battle, the shift in energy is palpable. Critics noted the tonal whiplash, his confident smirk, the lightness in his voice, the almost golden glow that surrounded him. For some, it was a betrayal of tone. For others, a resurrection not just of the man, but of what he stood for. He isn't the godlike, distant figure from BVS. He's Clark Kent again. Present. Alive. Not perfect, but whole. This moment isn't about power. It's about presence. His arrival doesn't solve the fight. It recenters it. And that leads us to the climactic battle in Russia. On a technical level, critics were divided. The red-hued sky, the faceless army of parademons, the somewhat sterile environment, it all felt more like a video game level than a lived-in world. But within that framework, the character dynamics sing. Barry conquers fear and taps into the Speed Force like never before. Victor connects with the unity and chooses humanity. Diana unleashes the warrior. Arthur finds loyalty. Bruce leads without needing to fight alone. Each beat is a culmination, a resolution to their personal arcs. And then, the world doesn't end. Because they stopped it. Together. The aftermath of the film, as brief as it is, speaks volumes. Bruce talks about building something more. Diana steps into the light. Barry shares joy with his father. Victor listens to a recording from his dad, not as a machine, but as a son. From a critical perspective, this resolution is bittersweet. The characters have grown. The story has reached its end. But the world around it, both fictional and real, is still unsettled. Much of the critical discussion around Justice League has less to do with the film itself, and more with what it represents. A movie born of compromise. A myth that was cut in half. A vision blurred by boardrooms. Some critics mourned what it could have been. Others celebrated what it managed to achieve, despite everything. What remains undeniable is the emotional resonance at its core. The idea that broken people can choose to come together. That symbols can return. That belief, fragile, flickering, can be reborn. Justice League, as messy and strange and stitched together as it is, contains within it the bones of something beautiful. And perhaps that's why, even years later, it continues to spark debate, inspire revisions, and ignite passion. Because deep down, it isn't just about gods and monsters. It's about us. Choosing to stand together. The story of Justice League is not just the story of heroes uniting on screen. It's the story of cinematic alchemy happening behind the scenes, where ambition clashed with reality, where vision met revision, and where chaos found unexpected moments of brilliance. The journey to bring this team of icons together wasn't just a feat of production. It was an odyssey of shifting tones, halted dreams, and moments of improvisation that somehow made it into one of the most talked-about films of the decade. Long before cameras even rolled, the scope of Justice League was gargantuan. Warner Brothers intended it to be a cornerstone in their cinematic universe, a response to the success of Marvel's sprawling ensemble epics. Zack Snyder, who had already established a myth-heavy, operatic tone with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, was originally tasked with not just directing, but shaping the very soul of this universe. He envisioned something big, larger than one film. This wasn't just Justice League. This was part one of a two-part saga that would end in cosmic war and deep moral reckoning, but the production world isn't built on dreams alone. Even as pre-production began in early 2016, studio pressure mounted. Batman v Superman had been financially successful but critically divisive. Executives wanted Justice League to be faster, lighter, more accessible. And yet, Snyder was already deep into planning massive set pieces, elaborate visual arcs, and character introductions that would echo across multiple films. The sets were massive, cathedrals of green screen and practical design. The Batcave was reconstructed with meticulous detail, including a working computer rig that Ben Affleck insisted be usable in real time. The Nightcrawler, Batman's multi-legged war machine, was built practically on a soundstage. The hangar, which held the Flying Fox aircraft, was modeled after military specs to make it feel like a real, grounded piece of tech. The scale was cinematic, but the mood on set often shifted. Because midway through production, everything changed. Following the tragic death of Zack Snyder's daughter, Autumn, he stepped away from the film. It was a quiet, painful exit, and one that sent ripples through the crew. 4 months, they'd been building a film that carried Zack's fingerprints on every frame. When he left, it wasn't just a change in director, it was a fracture in the vision. Enter Joss Whedon. And then, there's the marketing. Trailers released before the final cut were loaded with footage that never made it into the film. Entire lines, Bruce's "It's Something Darker" speech, Clark's heartfelt dialogue with Lois in the cornfield, extended versions of Barry's backstory, and Victor's football scene, were teased, then removed. The disparity between trailer and film became so glaring that fans began demanding the original cut be released. And thus began the movement. #Release the Snyder Cut. It started small, just a hashtag. A rumor. But it grew. Billboards were bought. Planes flew banners over comic conventions. Fans rallied with digital campaigns. And the cast, Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, Ray Fisher, Jason Momoa, began to voice support. What started as trivia turned into a cultural moment. People weren't just curious about what Snyder's version looked like. They demanded it. And in 2021, years later, HBO Max released Zack Snyder's Justice League. 4 hours long. Restored. Rewritten. Re-edit. Full of scenes once cut, characters once erased, arcs once abandoned. The strangest fact of all? That a film, once buried under corporate edits and studio mandates, was brought back to life by sheer force of collective will. But let's not forget the lighter moments behind the scenes. Jason Momoa, always the Joker, would frequently improvise his lines. His now famous "My man" shout was unscripted. So was his confession about being afraid just before battle. Those touches gave Aquaman a depth that surprised audiences. He wasn't just the brooding outsider, he was vulnerable. Raw. Funny. Ezra Miller, playing Barry Allen, often added personal flair to scenes. In one take, while the rest of the team landed dramatically, Barry tripped over his own feet and stumbled. Everyone laughed. Snyder loved it. It stayed. Gal Gadot, filming a scene in the Batcave, once laughed so hard during a take that the entire crew had to take a break. "The tension was heavy that day," she said in an interview. "We needed it." And Ben Affleck? He was directing Live by Night while filming Justice League. He'd review dailies in his trailer between scenes. Exhausted, overextended, yet committed. The film, for all its contradictions, became a kind of cinematic time capsule. A portrait of compromise. Of creative clashes. Of a franchise trying to find its voice through whispers, shouts, and last-minute rewrites. In the end, Justice League was less about the product and more about the journey. A film that, by its very existence, became a riddle. A movie made twice. A cast that rallied. A fandom that refused to forget. And through it all, somewhere beneath the CGI mustaches, the reshoots, the edited-out gods, and the digital resurrection of hope, there lived a heartbeat. A strange, messy, unforgettable heartbeat. That even in imperfection, stories have power. And sometimes, the strangest parts of a film's legacy are the ones that matter most. There's something hauntingly poetic about Justice League, not the film as it appeared in theaters, nor even the polished mythos it became in later interpretations, but the emotional, tangled space it occupies in cinematic history. For all its fractured tones and uneven structure, the story at its heart pulses with mythic weight. It's a film that reached towards something grander than its frames could hold, and even through its stumbles, it left behind moments that critics couldn't ignore. Some saw it as a muddled hybrid, others as a misunderstood epic. But within the chaos, the battle sequences, the silences, and the scattered pieces of narrative, Justice League reveals itself not just as a movie, but as a struggle. For identity, for unity, for belief in something greater than power. The story opens not with triumph, but with loss. The death of Superman, carried over from Batman v Superman, casts a shadow not only over the world within the film, but over the film itself. It's a bold choice to begin a superhero film with silence, with grief, with absence rather than spectacle. Critics took note. Some praised the somber tone as a natural continuation of Snyder's mythic vision, placing Superman as a messianic figure whose death throws the Earth into cosmic imbalance. Others saw it as a tonal misfire, a world of superheroes made too cold, too detached. But in that absence lies the film's first critical theme. The consequence of power lost every major event that unfolds afterward. Steppenwolf's return, the activation of the mother boxes, the fracturing of global security, sprouts from the void Superman left behind. The film's world doesn't crumble because evil is strong, but because hope is weak. This, more than the villain's plan or the hero's formations, is the emotional undercurrent of Justice League. The idea that when we lose symbols of unity, division rushes in to take their place. Bruce Wayne feels this most acutely. His guilt is never directly stated, but it's in every line of dialogue, every furrowed glance. From a critical perspective, Bruce's arc becomes the spine of the narrative. Once the loner vigilante consumed by paranoia, he emerges here as a man seeking redemption through assembly. Critics have often pointed to this shift as one of the more compelling character evolutions in the DCU. He's not trying to save the world because he believes he can. He's trying because he must. Because failing again isn't an option. This leads into the film's second major theme, unity through imperfection. The assembling of the League is not clean or inspiring at first. Arthur Curry laughs in Bruce's face. Victor Stone hides in shadows. Barry Allen joins out of loneliness, not purpose. Diana, wise and cautious, sees the cracks in Bruce's plan even as she supports it. From a structural standpoint, the team lacks cohesion. But that dissonance is intentional. Critics who dove deeper into the film's subtext saw a reflection of real-world fragmentation. Societies that had grown distant, individuals who mistrusted institutions, people afraid to believe in each other again. And so, the League is formed not as a band of shining heroes, but as a council of the broken. Nowhere is this clearer than in the film's central moral dilemma, the resurrection of Superman. From a narrative standpoint, it's a risky pivot. Rather than discovering a new savior, the heroes turn back to the old one. But this moment is rich with emotional and ethical complexity. They aren't just trying to bring back a man, they're trying to resurrect the very idea of hope. The use of the mother box here takes on symbolic weight. It's not merely a sci-fi device. It's a vessel for rebirth, for dangerous second chances. Known for his witty dialogue and ensemble storytelling, Whedon was brought in initially to polish the script. But after Snyder's departure, Whedon took over directorial duties. What followed were extensive reshoots that would last for over 2 months. Whedon rewrote scenes, added new moments, and was given a mandate by Warner Brothers. The film must be no longer than 2 hours. It didn't matter how much footage had been shot or what story arcs had been established. This was now a different film. For the cast and crew, the transition was jarring. They'd grown attached to Snyder's methodical pacing, his thematic grandeur, and his visual symbolism. Whedon brought a different energy, faster scenes, more banter, brighter lighting. Gal Gadot recalled in an interview that some days felt like they were filming 2 different movies. "It was hard," she said. "You'd shoot one thing in the morning, and something completely different in the afternoon." One of the most notorious effects of the reshoots involved Henry Cavill's mustache. At the time of the additional photography, Cavill was filming Mission Impossible: Fallout for Paramount. His character in that film required a thick, neatly groomed mustache, and Paramount refused to let him shave it off, even temporarily. Warner Brothers, needing him for Superman's new scenes, had no choice but to digitally remove the mustache in post-production. The result became one of the most talked-about visual effects in recent history. His upper lip, unnaturally smooth and expressionless, drew immediate attention. The crew nicknamed it the digital shave. Behind the scenes, VFX teams reportedly worked around the clock on facial compositing, frame by frame. The cost? Millions. The result? Infamy. But not all surprises were digital. Ezra Miller, playing the Flash, brought an improvisational energy to the set that delighted the crew. In one scene, Barry is supposed to fall onto Wonder Woman during battle, his face landing near hers. Gal Gadot wasn't available for that particular day, so a male stunt double filled in. The result? A now infamous behind-the-scenes photo of Ezra lying atop a very muscular man in full Wonder Woman costume. Everyone laughed. The shot was eventually res-hot with Gal, but the story lived on. Jason Momoa, as Arthur Curry, often went off-script to add flavor to his scenes. His line, "My man," after Superman rescues him was improvised on the spot. He also pushed to add moments where Arthur interacts with civilians, like the scene where he shares whiskey with a local villager, wanting Aquaman to feel grounded, like a mythic figure who still understood the common man. "We're not gods," he said in an interview. "We're warriors. We bleed. We drink. We protect. Ray Fisher's cyborg, originally intended as the emotional core of the film, underwent some of the heaviest cuts during post-production. Much of his backstory, his mother's death, his struggle with identity, his growth into a leader, was removed to tighten the runtime. The crew felt this loss deeply. Fisher's performance was subtle, internal, a young man learning to accept who he had become. The scenes that remained only hinted at his arc. On set, he was known for being intensely focused, often staying in character between takes. And then there was Ben Affleck. Carrying the weight of Batman's legacy and his own personal demons, Affleck approached the role with a weary gravitas. During the Whedon reshoots, his demeanor reportedly changed. Friends said he felt the tone of the film slipping away from the grounded, redemptive arc he'd started. He finished the film, but quietly stepped away from the role soon after, leaving behind a legacy marked by brilliance and burnout. Despite all the tension, there were moments of pure joy. One day, Zack Snyder brought his children to the set. They watched quietly as Superman hovered above a ruined battlefield, and their eyes lit up not with awe, but with familiarity. "They've lived with these characters all their lives," Snyder said. "They're like family." Danny Elfman, brought in to compose a new score, reintroduced classic musical themes, including John Williams' Superman motif and his own 1989 Batman theme. These callbacks were divisive among fans but offered moments of nostalgic triumph. Elfman believed that legacy mattered, and he wanted audiences to hear the echoes of cinema's past in this new incarnation. Meanwhile, the film's sets became playgrounds of both danger and creativity. The warehouse where the League meets was built to feel real. Dust, shadows, exposed wires. The Batcave, recreated from BVS, had actual working displays. For the Flash's scenes, a rotating tunnel was constructed to simulate his speed through time. Every set had function, not just form, but the greatest fun came not from the big scenes, but from the little ones. Between takes, Gal Gadot would practice her sword spins with crew members, occasionally knocking over props. Ezra Miller played ukulele during lunch breaks. Jeremy Irons, in full Alfred costume, could often be found sipping espresso and discussing Shakespeare with the costume department. And then there were the Easter eggs. Some were planned, others hidden. The newspaper clippings in Lois Lane's apartment were filled with headlines referencing other DC cities: Gotham floods, Ferris air layoffs. One monitor in the Batcave displayed a LutherTech interface. In one cut scene, Barry mentions a Gorilla Sign Language experiment gone wrong, a cheeky nod to Gorilla Grodd, a Flash villain. But perhaps the strangest bit of production trivia? At one point during filming, an assistant director wore a full Green Lantern costume to set, just for laughs. The crew, in on the joke, told extras he was a surprise character. Rumors spread quickly. The moment was caught on a cell phone. To this day, some still believe a lantern was cut from the film because of that prank. In the end, Justice League wrapped its turbulent production in a fog of uncertainty. The final film, released in 2017, reflected fragments of what had once been a sweeping vision. And yet, from those fragments came a movement. Fans rallied. The #Release the Snyder Cut campaign grew. Years later, HBO Max released Zack Snyder's Justice League, a 4-hour odyssey that restored the lost footage, character arcs, and original tone. A film once disassembled was rebuilt, not just by the studio, but by the audience. Looking back, the production of Justice League is more than a tale of reshoots and re-edits. It's a testament to the people who built something amid confusion, who showed up every day to pour truth into costumes, into shadows, into dialogue, who worked through grief and pressure and creative uncertainty to deliver scenes that still, somehow, found resonance. Because sometimes, even the messiest journeys leave the most unforgettable footprints. And sometimes, the real League is the crew behind the curtain. There's a world behind Justice League that you don't just see, you feel it pressing at the edges of every scene. It breathes through ruin and rubble, glows through alien light, and hangs in the stillness of a cornfield beneath a sky mourning the loss of a god. Though the film was reshaped and reassembled behind the scenes, its cinematic soul, stitched from a tapestry of settings and visual languages, remains one of the most intriguing aspects of its creation. This is a story told not only through characters and dialogue, but through vast mythic places that echo with history and future, tragedy and hope, all captured by a camera lens searching for emotional truth in every shadow. The settings of Justice League are not just backdrops for action. They are symbolic spaces, each one sculpted to reflect the inner worlds of its heroes and the chaos that threatens to consume them. There's no singular city, no centralized location that anchors the film. Instead, it drifts across continents, from frigid coasts to ancient battlefields, from sterile labs to scorched alien tombs. This fragmented geography mirrors the fractured state of the world within the film, a planet lost in confusion, trying to hold together without the figure who once made it believe in the impossible. Let's begin in Gotham. It's a city we've seen before in countless forms, always drowning in shadow, stitched together with gargoyles and alleyways. But here, in Justice League, Gotham feels quieter. Not safer, just quieter. As though it, too, is morning. The camera lingers on rooftops bathed in fog, crumbling industrial walls, and rain-slicked streets that glimmer under streetlights like broken glass. It's a setting defined by isolation. It reflects Bruce Wayne's mindset, defensive, brooding, trapped in repetition. His scenes, lit in cool blues and industrial gray, carry an emotional weight that speaks of guilt, of something unresolved beneath the armor. The frame swells with distance between him and everyone else, until that distance is finally broken by the team he begins to form. Contrast that with Themyscira. The home of the Amazons is a sunlit sanctuary carved from stone and wind. It's alive with movement, horses galloping across cliffs, warriors poised with ageless grace. The color palette here is rich and warm, a golden counterbalance to Gotham's chill. It represents tradition, honor, the strength of unity that Bruce is still searching for. But even this sacred ground is not untouchable. When Steppenwolf invades, crashing through the heavens in a column of thunder and flame, the violence against this untouched land serves as a harrowing metaphor. The old world is no longer safe. The camera doesn't rush the action. It holds, watching tragedy unfold with reverence. The battle is brutal, but what lingers is the echo of something pure being violated. And then there's Atlantis. If Themyscira is a fortress of light, Atlantis is a fortress of pressure. Dark, rippling, built from bioluminescent coral and silent halls, it's a place that breathes water. Light flickers like flame here, constantly in motion. The scenes beneath the sea are chaotic but strangely serene, until they're pierced by Steppenwolf's attack. What's striking is how disconnected Atlantis feels. Arthur Curry arrives like an outsider, swimming through his birthright like a stranger returning to a home that doesn't want him. The claustrophobia of underwater combat, the way voices are muted and amplified all at once, creates a dreamlike intensity. It's beautiful and sad, because it doesn't feel like a place where Arthur belongs. Not yet. The visual language shifts again when we meet Barry Allen in Central City. Barry's world is fast, colorful, and cluttered. His scenes are filled with kinetic energy, even when he's standing still. The set dressing tells his story long before he speaks. Pizza boxes, computer monitors, wires, books, everything in his space vibrates with youthful chaos. The camera changes when he's around. It moves more. It plays with time. And when he taps into the Speed Force, time itself becomes malleable. Slow motion isn't new to superhero films, but here it feels less like a trick and more like a necessity, an insight into Barry's inner world. To him, this is how life works. The swirl of lightning, the sparks trailing off his movements, the distortion of sound, they aren't just effects. They're expressions of isolation, of being too fast for anyone to truly understand. Victor Stone's setting is much colder, sterile, unfinished. His home feels like a tomb, a place where science collided with grief and left something halfway between human and machine. His scenes are shot in neutral grays and deep shadows, reflecting the digital binary reality he's been forced to inhabit. The lighting is minimal, the space is empty. But look closely and you'll see touches of memory. Framed photos, untouched clothes, remnants of a life that was once vibrant. As Victor walks through his home, there's a sense that he's haunting it, not living. The digital interfaces that flow around him, holograms, data streams, alien languages, make his world feel more like a computer simulation than a place of warmth. It enhances his arc. He isn't just disconnected from society. He's disconnected from place, from meaning. And yet, when he joins the League, that alien code begins to glow with purpose. The Kryptonian ship, hidden beneath Metropolis, becomes one of the most symbolically charged spaces in the entire film. It's a cathedral of the future, cold, echoing, yet sacred. The architecture is alien, yet strangely symmetrical. The resurrection scene that takes place here is a mixture of awe and dread. The pools are reflective, the lighting soft, as though the ship itself is uncertain about what's being done within it. It's a setting built for rebirth, but not without cost. The cinematography in these scenes turns introspective, close-ups of hands trembling, of eyes flickering. The vastness of the chamber contrasts with the intimacy of what's being attempted. They're playing God inside a spaceship shaped like a tomb. And then, at last, there's the final battleground, a remote, abandoned Russian town near the remnants of a nuclear facility. This setting feels deliberately devoid of life. It's isolated, decayed, littered with the wreckage of technology and humanity. The sky is stained red, an unnatural hue created by the fusion of the mother boxes. The Earth itself seems poisoned, the buildings rotted and tilting. It's a wasteland not just physically, but emotionally, a space that symbolizes what the world could become if unity fails. Some critics dismissed the location as generic. But look deeper, and you see the point. It's a canvas. A mirror. It represents what happens when fear takes root, when division consumes a place until it forgets its name. The red sky, the swarming parademons, the desolation, it's not just alien terror. It's a visualization of internal collapse. When the League battles here, the cinematography shifts again. The camera becomes more mobile, swinging in wide arcs, tracking from overhead to ground level, as though capturing the rebirth of movement after so much stasis. Every punch, every flight, every throw is shot with weight and consequence. But the film doesn't just celebrate the heroes, it celebrates what they fight for. In one small, almost throwaway moment, Barry saves a family trapped in a house. Superman, in the background, flies an entire apartment building to safety. These aren't world-shaking acts. But they matter. They remind us that beneath all the spectacle, the setting is inhabited. And worth saving. Back on Earth, when the dust settles, we find ourselves once again in the quiet serenity of Clark Kent's childhood home. The Kansas cornfields. The yellow sun. The house with the creaky porch. It's the opposite of every location we visited. Small, grounded, real. The grass is overgrown. The mailbox is dented. But it's alive. This is where Clark remembers who he is. Where Superman becomes Clark again. The golden hour lighting in these scenes is deliberate. It softens the frame. Warms it. Gives it breath. This shift, away from grandeur, back to roots, is where Justice League finds its closing note. From a visual and emotional standpoint, the journey across these settings reflects the emotional transformation of the characters themselves. Bruce moves from the darkness of Gotham into the light of leadership. Diana leaves her sacred island to embrace connection. Arthur rises from the ocean's depths to walk the earth again. Barry runs not from the world, but into it. Victor emerges from isolation into meaning. And Clark, the man who once fell from the sky, finds home. The cinematography, spearheaded in part by Fabian Wagner during Snyder's shoot, bathes the film in high contrast. Shadows are deep. Highlights bloom. The palette is not realistic, it's painterly. Almost religious in tone. Faces are framed like icons. Action is slowed not to show off, but to show consequence. And when that style is interrupted by Whedon's brighter, more kinetic energy, it creates a dissonance that, whether intentional or not, speaks to the film's fractured soul. And yet, within those fractures, something beautiful still glows. Because the setting of Justice League isn't one place. It's a world trying to hold itself together. A planet remembering its heroes. A canvas for unity painted in shadow and flame and light. Every ruin, every battlefield, every empty street carries the echo of something almost lost, and finally found again. Not with explosions. With belief. Behind the myth of Justice League, beyond the gods and monsters and multiverse mayhem, lived a very human story. One not written in script pages or CGI renderings, but in the everyday rhythms of creation. In jokes shared between takes, in quiet moments of exhaustion, in spontaneous sparks of improvisation that turned ordinary days into extraordinary ones. The film's final product may be a patchwork of tones and visions, but behind the curtain, the process of making it was filled with passion, friction, fatigue, and a strange sort of joy that only emerges when artists keep pushing forward, even when the path is uncertain. The making of Justice League began with a feeling. Not a directive, not a formula, but a tone. Zack Snyder, who had helmed both Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, had a specific idea in mind for the League. This wouldn't be just a team-up film. It would be a resurrection story, an epic in the Greek tragedy sense, full of fallen heroes, cosmic stakes, and visual poetry. So when pre-production began, it felt less like a traditional blockbuster setup and more like preparing for a war waged with mood boards and mythology. The Batcave was constructed again, this time even grander. But not just for show. Ben Affleck, committed to immersing himself in the world of Bruce Wayne, asked for working monitors, movable props, and functioning platforms, wanting to feel the tactility of Batman's world. The set was detailed down to the scratches on metal, the worn-down grips of gadgets, and the tire treads on the Batmobile's floor. Crew members joked that you could actually live in the Batcave if they let you. Across the studio lot, Gal Gadot trained in both swordplay and shield technique between costume fittings. Wonder Woman's grace on screen didn't come from wirework, it came from muscle memory. Gal would spend hours perfecting her footwork, sometimes rehearsing fight sequences on her own when everyone else had gone home. The goal, she said, was to feel like the strength was second nature. Like it had always been there. Ezra Miller, ever the whirlwind of energy, brought his own unique rhythm to the set. His version of Barry Allen was quick-witted, awkward, and deeply empathetic, and that started with Ezra himself. During downtime, he'd serenade the crew with a ukulele, often singing improvised songs about whatever chaos was unfolding that day. He had names for everyone's walkie-talkie handles, often interrupting technical conversations with absurd but affectionate nicknames. It drove the assistant directors crazy, but it kept spirits high on long days when the weight of big-budget pressure threatened to collapse the atmosphere. Jason Momoa was the anchor, the wild card, the spirit animal of the crew. Though Aquaman had long been a pop culture punchline, Jason attacked the role with pride and primal energy. His mornings started early, with intense physical training, and his afternoons ended with cheers of "My man" echoing through the set. One day, between takes, he dived into a water tank fully clothed, laughing, because he needed to cool off from the heat of Atlantis. The costume team didn't laugh as much. They had to dry 3 sets of leather armor overnight. But no one could deny the man was living the role. Ray Fisher, playing Victor Stone, was the quiet storm. His character arc, meant to be the emotional backbone of the film, weighed heavily on him. He carried that responsibility with both pride and frustration, especially as the shoot shifted during reshoots. During the original shoot, Snyder gave Ray space to explore Victor's internal conflict, often discussing scenes privately with him before takes. On those days, Ray often stayed in his cyborg suit even during lunch breaks, eating with one hand and controlling his phone with the other, never quite stepping out of character. Then came the reshoots. When Zack Snyder stepped away from the film after the heartbreaking loss of his daughter, the production changed. The mood on set grew more somber, more guarded. Joss Whedon stepped in, and with him came a new script, a new energy, and a lot of uncertainty. The cast, though professional, had to recalibrate. Scenes they had lived through months earlier were rewritten. Jokes were added. Entire arcs were condensed. There were days when an actor would deliver the same line 3 different ways: Snyder's way, Whedon's way, and let's try something in the middle. The most infamous story from the reshoots, of course, was the mustache. Henry Cavill, mid-filming Mission Impossible Fallout, was contractually forbidden from shaving the full mustache he wore for his role as CIA operative August Walker. So when Warner Brothers called him back for Superman reshoots, the solution was clear and absolutely absurd: they would digitally remove the mustache in post. The result? The VFX team spent hundreds of hours and millions of dollars smoothing out Cavill's upper lip. The cast joked about it endlessly. Affleck would often lift his lip and speak in slow motion. "Do I look like Hope?" he'd ask. Cavill, good-humored, took it in stride. "It's Superman," he once said, with a bit of an upper lip complex. Even with all the tension, there were moments of beauty. Zack Snyder, ever the visual architect, used pre-visualization extensively. His storyboards were hand-drawn, cinematic, and deeply personal. He would often walk the cast through scenes using models and concept art, describing not just what was happening, but why. "You're not just punching him," he'd tell Affleck. "You're trying to believe in yourself again. That's the punch." It wasn't about choreography. It was about emotion. Whedon, in contrast, kept things lighter. He encouraged on-set improvisation. He gave new lines to Barry and Bruce mid-shoot. Some landed. Some didn't. But the process was fluid, alive. During one rooftop scene with Gordon, Batman's disappearance was rewritten into a joke. Barry looks around, sees the others gone, and awkwardly remarks, "Oh, they just disappear like that?" That moment wasn't in the original script. It happened on set, and it made the cut. The cinematography, spearheaded originally by Fabian Wagner, was deeply stylized. The lighting setups were massive, the shots composed with painterly intention. Scenes were often lit with large-scale practical sources: flames, glowing tech, environmental light, to enhance realism. The team used specialized camera rigs to follow Flash's speedruns, constructing elaborate rail systems to simulate the blur of lightning. The result was a mixture of grounded framing and operatic grandeur. Production design brought its own set of surprises. The mother boxes, central to the plot, were built as physical props with pulsing lights and shifting surfaces. They weren't just green screen placeholders. The VFX team worked closely with practical effects artists to make the boxes react to actors' presence. When Steppenwolf, played via motion capture by Kieran Hines, appeared, his interactions with the box were mirrored by real-time lighting changes, a subtle touch that helped the performers respond more naturally. Some scenes proved especially difficult. The tunnel battle beneath Gotham Harbor took nearly 2 weeks to shoot. Water rigs malfunctioned, actors slipped, and on one occasion, an explosion cue triggered too early, soaking the stunt team. But the result, a swirling fight through tunnels, steam, and steel, was a standout sequence. The cast loved it. "It was like shooting in a giant sewer rave," Momoa laughed. One of the most emotional days on set came during Superman's resurrection. The entire cast stood in the Kryptonian ship, watching as Cavill emerged from the water, silent, confused. No one spoke during the first take. Not even between camera resets. "It felt like something sacred," said one crew member. "Like we were witnessing a god wake up." And through it all, there were small, quiet moments that never made it into the press. Affleck once bought the entire crew lunch after a grueling 3-day shoot, signing napkins with, "From Bruce, stay vigilant." Gal Gadot brought homemade food from home one weekend, sharing it with makeup artists and costume designers. Miller wrote a poem for each crew member on his last day of shooting. Fisher gifted copies of August Wilson's plays to the assistant directors, thanking them for treating him like a theater actor, not just a visual effect. Even when the final theatrical version arrived, cut down, shifted, strange, it carried traces of all those stories. A chair still scratched from a moving set wall. A line changed at the last minute. A stunt rewritten on the spot. A joke born from a tired afternoon and a boom mic operator who accidentally dropped his coffee. Justice League is many things. It is fractured. It is flawed. But it is also made by people. People who showed up, despite rewrites. Who kept laughing, even when things fell apart. Who believed in something bigger than themselves. And who, for a few months, lived together not as legends, but as a league. In Justice League, beneath the capes and the chaos, beneath the parademons and mother boxes, there runs a pulse quieter than battle cries and louder than victory. It is the heartbeat of theme. This isn't just a movie about superheroes saving the world. It's a story of broken people, fractured systems, and flickering hope. It's about loss, unity, rebirth, and belief, not in gods, but in each other. And what makes this film endure, even in its most disjointed form, is the way it weaves those themes through its characters, its story arcs, and the subtle symbols scattered like breadcrumbs in the corners of its frame. The story begins not with triumph, but with absence. Superman is dead. His scream, echoing into the void at the start of the film, isn't just the literal sound of a dying man. It's the opening note of a world unraveling. That moment, slow and painful, ripples across the globe, seen in statues left in ruin, in Lois Lane's silence, in Bruce Wayne's desperation. From the outset, the film establishes one of its most dominant themes. The consequence of lost hope. Superman is not just a character in the world of Justice League. He is a symbol. The red and blue suit, the curl of hair, the emblem of the House of L, they represent more than strength. They represent certainty. Possibility. The idea that someone will always show up when all else fails. With him gone, the world doesn't just feel less safe. It feels less possible. This vacuum of hope doesn't just invite danger, it demands response. The characters that remain are forced to ask themselves a question they've long avoided. If the symbol is gone, who will step up? And so enters the next theme, reluctant unity. None of the members of the Justice League want to be part of a team. They're isolated, protective, wounded. Batman is haunted by guilt. Wonder Woman hides from the public, scarred by centuries of loss. Aquaman lives between worlds, never fully belonging to either. Cyborg fears what he's become. The Flash is eager but unsure, more spark than fire. They don't come together because they want to. They do so because the world is falling apart and they can no longer afford the luxury of separation. This forced collaboration echoes a deeper symbolism, the need to embrace imperfection in unity. The Justice League isn't like the Justice Society or the Avengers. They're not a polished group of soldiers. They're a mosaic of cracked individuals, brought together not because they complete each other, but because they challenge each other. Their differences aren't obstacles. They're ingredients. And it's only when they lean into those contradictions that they start to function. That transition, from solitude to solidarity, is the emotional core of the film. One of the clearest visual representations of this theme lies in the recurring use of triangles and the Trinity motif. The three mother boxes, ancient and pulsating with alien power, are central to the villain's plan. Their unification threatens to reshape Earth into something new, cold, mechanical, obedient. The boxes are a symbol of absolute control, of forced unity through domination. In contrast, the League represents the opposite, chosen unity, messy and flawed but born of will, not coercion. This dichotomy, between unity by force and unity by choice, is constantly reinforced. When the League separates the boxes at the film's climax, it's not just a victory in battle. It's a philosophical stance. We choose who we become together. Resurrection also plays heavily into the film's thematic framework. Bringing Superman back isn't a clean or triumphant moment. It's frightening. Morally complex. It asks the League and the audience what it means to play God. When Superman returns, he's not himself. He's lost, volatile, alien. His resurrection is a symbolic mirror of the world's resurrection. It isn't instant, and it isn't easy. It comes with confusion, with confrontation, with uncertainty. But through it, we see another key theme: identity through rediscovery. Each member of the League is also undergoing a kind of resurrection. Bruce, once driven by fear, now leads with faith. Diana, who withdrew from humanity after the death of Steve Trevor, begins to step back into the light. Arthur, hiding from both land and sea, starts to see himself as protector. Barry begins as a boy running from his pain, and ends by embracing his role in a world bigger than himself. Victor, arguably the most powerful metaphor of them all, is literally pieced together from tragedy. His journey is one of accepting both halves of himself, the man he was and the machine he's become. Victor's character is especially rich in symbolic layering. His body is part human, part alien technology, fused by the same mother box that threatens to destroy the planet. He sees himself as a weapon, a threat. But his arc is about understanding that what's inside him doesn't define him. It's what he chooses to do with it. He is the symbol of duality, of choice over origin. And when he enters the Unity at the end of the film, confronted by images of his family, of the life he lost, he makes a conscious decision to reject false comfort and choose reality. That moment is less about saving the world and more about saving himself. The film also explores the idea of inheritance and legacy. Each hero wrestles with what they've inherited, from their families, their species, their societies. Superman inherits the legacy of Krypton, but also the Earth that raised him. Bruce inherits the guilt of a fallen Gotham and a father's dying wish. Diana carries the burden of the Amazons and a world that once burned. Victor is burdened with a legacy he never asked for, rebuilt by a father who tried to save him with science. And Barry, whose father sits behind prison glass, inherits a justice system that failed him. These legacies are heavy. But Justice League doesn't suggest that legacy defines destiny. It asks the characters to rewrite their stories, to take the past not as prophecy, but as a starting point. Symbols throughout the film are used to underscore this point. The Superman memorial, defaced and damaged, becomes a central visual throughout the story. It represents how even the strongest ideals can be torn down. But when Superman returns, not just physically, but emotionally, when he smiles, when he saves civilians, when he flies alongside the team, it becomes clear that the symbol hasn't been erased. It's been reborn. Not through the monument, but through action. Even the team's headquarters, hinted at by Bruce at the end, becomes symbolic. A hall with 6 chairs. Room to grow. It's not about who sits in them, it's about what they stand for. It's a declaration. We've come together not to dominate, but to protect. And yet, there's still one more layer to the film's themes that deserves mention. Fear. Steppenwolf's army feeds on it. His parademons literally hunt fear. This isn't just an enemy, it's an embodiment of a world turned inward. A planet too afraid to trust, too afraid to rise. The heroes must defeat that fear not with fists, but with courage. Every decision, bringing back Superman, fighting as a team, trusting each other, is a defiance of that fear. And in that defiance, they find strength. The final battle, often criticized for its red sky visuals and CGI swarm, still carries symbolic weight. The red sky, bleeding into the earth, is a visual metaphor for infection, for the sickness of fear and division. And when the League defeats Steppenwolf, when they refuse to let darkness define them, the sky clears. The earth settles. It's not just a shift in weather. It's a shift in tone, in spirit. Even the smallest moments carry meaning. Barry saving one family in a truck, while Superman lifts an entire building, shows us that heroism isn't about scale. It's about intent, about care. In those small gestures, the film reminds us that saving the world isn't always about lasers and lightning. Sometimes, it's about being present. And when Bruce, once the most cynical of them all, says, "Faith, Alfred, faith," we understand how far he's come. His arc, from vengeance to belief, mirrors the film's own evolution. What began in darkness ends in possibility. It's not perfect. It doesn't try to be. But Justice League holds its themes close to the chest, daring us to look past the spectacle and see the real story. A story about people, broken and burdened, who choose each other. Who choose to fight. Not because they're certain they'll win, but because it's worth trying. Because that's what a league is. Not legends. Just believers. The making of Justice League was less like a straight path and more like a winding road split in two. One part the dream of a mythmaker sculpting visual poetry with cinematic fire, the other part the rushed improvisation of a studio trying to recut lightning in the shape of a crowd pleaser. But whether viewed through the lens of artistic ambition or production compromise, the filmmaking techniques behind Justice League tell a story of contrast, of visual signatures colliding and occasionally aligning in moments that dazzle, ache, or simply refuse to be forgotten. And beyond the artistry, beyond the edits and shadows, lies the story of its release, a box office saga as turbulent as the movie's journey itself.